Okay, so this is the first lesson of the factoring unit. So we are leaving behind triangles and moving towards a different kind of equation. So last year you focused a lot on linear equations, and this year which had an x term with, or y or whatever, with an exponent of 1. Now we're going to look at expressions that have an exponent of, the biggest exponent will be 2. Okay, so this unit is sort of manipulating those equations, and then this next section will be graphing quadratics, so like parabolas in different shapes like that. So this first lesson, we are going to be doing something called factoring. So last year, you would have spent a lot of time expanding and distributing. This year, we're going to go the opposite way as well, called factoring. Okay, so we'll look at some things that you have to remember. So product is the word we use to describe the answer to multiplication. So there are a bunch of ways to express multiplying. So if you write two numbers beside each other in brackets, then you're multiplying. You can do numbers with letters. You could even do numbers with one letter and not. Multiplying, the bases don't have to be the same. Or you can do something like this, which is distributing. So the distributive property, you have to, if there's something outside the bracket, the term, then you need to multiply that term inside the bracket. So sometimes the term on the outside will just be a number, and sometimes it will be a number with a variable as well. Okay, so it could be x, y, whatever. It doesn't matter. P, Q, doesn't matter. The exponent laws, you also would have learned those in grade 9. So if you are multiplying powers that have the same base, so these are both a, then you add the exponents. So if it was 2 to the power of 5 times 2 to the power of 2, then that would be 2 to the power of 7. So you would add them. And then if you divide powers that have the same base, then you subtract. So 2 to the power of 5 and 2 to the power of 2 makes 2 to the power of 3. Sometimes people will choose to sort of cancel it out, like these cancel out, and then you would write a 3 here. But basically, you're doing the same thing. You're still subtracting. So it doesn't really matter how your brain thinks of it. Okay, so let's expand these first. Okay, so we're going to distribute. So 2 has to be multiplied by both of the terms inside the brackets. So you're thinking 2 times 4x plus 2 times 7, okay? So maybe you did this a million times last year and you were so good at it. So 2 times 4x is 8x and 2 times 7 is 14. Or perhaps your brain still has to think of it this way, which is no problem, that the 2 goes with the 4x and the 2 is going to be multiplied by the 7. So same thing here. You're thinking 3x times 2x plus 3x times 5. So now this is one where the bases are the same. So you multiply the numbers, which is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. And then you would add the exponent. So this is x to the power of 1. Plus x to the power of 1, which is x squared. And then 3x times 5 is 15x. And then when you have negative 5 times 6x, then you're thinking negative 5 times 6x, and then negative 9 times negative 5. So this can be a little bit tricky because now when you have a negative out front, that's going to change the sign, right? So you're going to get negative 30x, and then negative 9 times negative 5 actually makes it positive 45, right? When you multiply two numbers that are negative, you get a positive answer. Okay, and then even one here, even though there's lots of letters, that doesn't matter. You're thinking 4x squared. Draw your arrows if it helps. Lots of students do that. Even in grade 10, Who cares? Okay, so 4x squared times 3x to the power of 4. So you multiply the numbers, so you get 12, 4 times 3. And then x squared times x to the power of 4, you add. So 2 plus 4 is 6. Okay, and then 4x squared, sorry, I'm running out of room, times 4x squared. Now you have 16. 4 times 4 is 16. And then x squared, and x squared, or x squared times x squared means x to the power of 4. 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay, so that is expanding. And then, so we're going to move towards the opposite in grade 10, which is factoring. So when you're factoring another number, then we're going to write it as a product. So we're going to write it as multiplication. And when you do factoring, there's tons and tons and tons of different types of factoring. So we're just really going to scratch the surface. But the first kind we talk about is what's called a common factor. Okay, so let's say you were going to write the number 24. So 24 can be written as, when you're doing products, right? We're talking about factoring. You're going to write a number as a product. So multiplication. Okay, so we're doing 6 times 4 is 24. 2 times 12 is 24. Even you could write it as 3 times 8 is 24. When you factor 24 into numbers that cannot be broken down any further or cannot be factored any further, we call that fully factored. So sometimes let's say you had a fraction, you would your answer had to be the most reduced, or that kind of terminology, divided by the biggest number that will get it all the way down to the simplest. Okay, so we are going to do numbers that are not just integers like this. We're going to do polynomials, which means we're going to have letters, we're going to have x's or y's or whatever, and we're going to factor it to express it as a product. So basically, we're going to go backwards. So we're going to what we're going to do is take an expression like this and change it into this, okay? Which is really essentially the opposite of what you did in grade 9. Okay, so the GCF is the greatest common factor, and you might have heard that even in elementary school, okay? So again, you can have a number or a term that has just numbers, so then you're looking for the largest number. And then if you have a variable like x or y or even xy, okay, it can be together, then when you're finding the greatest common factor of those, you want to use the lowest value. So if you have x squared, x cubed, and x to the power of 4, then you can use the one that's the lowest. Okay? And what we're going to do is, again, cancel out or divide. So if we reduce these numbers and divide by x squared, then this will give us 1, right? Anything divided by itself is 1. The second term here gives us, like if you cancel those out, x, and then this would give us x squared. So now if we have 1, x, and x squared, they have been factored fully because you can't divide them by anything else evenly. And how did I know where to do that? I looked at my terms initially. So I had x squared, x cubed, and x to the power of 4. And I chose the one that was the smallest, which was x squared. Okay, so let's do more of those. So we'll just do determining the greatest common factor first. Okay, so, and really, to be honest, eventually when we get into more complicated questions, then you're actually always going to look for the greatest common factor first, always. Okay, so, and the good news is you can actually check. Okay, so then you can check that you're right, that you've done it right. Okay, so what you should do when you have numbers like this, 4, 16, 32, what I would do is, especially if you're not good at multiplication tables, if you're good at multiplication tables, then maybe you'll be able to see it. But if you're not good at it, then why not give it a try and divide by the number, the first number, the smallest number. Because the lowest we can go is 1, right? We want it to be a whole number. We don't want to go like with no decimals, okay? So when you do this, you can kind of look for tricks. So 4, 16, 32, those are all even numbers. So then can they be divided by 4? Yes. If the second number here, let's say, was 15 instead of 16, we would know that 4 wouldn't work because 15 is an odd number. So, those kind of, if you know those kinds of pieces of information that probably you would have discussed a long time ago in elementary school, those are actually going to be useful here. Multiplication tables will be useful. In fact, I'm going to put on D2L when we get into factoring more difficult than this, a multiplication table to help you. Okay, so those man-minute things that maybe your elementary school teacher made you do are definitely not for naught. They do have a purpose. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try 4. So what you can think in your head again, so we're going to take each of them. And if I want to choose my greatest common factor is 4, then I'm going to check, okay? So divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And 32 divided by 4 is 8. Okay, so now when you're checking, then you're looking for can all of the numbers be divided further, and they all have to be divided by the same thing. So even though 4 and 8, yes, you can divide 4 by 4, and yes, you can divide 8 by 4, you can't divide 1 by 4 and get a whole number. You would get 0.25, which is a decimal. That's not what we want. Okay, so you're checking that they cannot be divided further and they all evenly, and they all have to be divided by the same thing. So I'm just going to write that down. I'm not going to say the same number because later on you're going to see that you actually can divide by letters as well, but has to be divisible by the same thing. So 1, 4, and 8 are not divisible by the same thing. Then the greatest common factor of 4 is right. Okay, so now in B, we have 3x, 15x squared, and 75x cubed. So maybe it's actually easier for you to look at the letters first, okay? So again, when you pick a variable to divide, then you have to pick the one that has the lowest exponent. So x to the power of 1. If you write x to the power of 1, I won't take marks off, but again, it's sort of understood. And then maybe you need to check, okay? So again, get your calculator out, and this time it's just going to be multiplying and dividing. You can definitely use your phone, okay? There's no sine, cos, or tan. So then if you're not sure, so I'm going to, again, do the smallest number. So I chose x already, and then I'm going to choose 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 75 divided by 3 is 25. So we're probably okay. So I'm going to pick 3x. 3x divided by 3 is 1. 15x squared divided by 3x is 5x. And 75x cubed divided by 3x is 25. And then, sorry, I did that other one kind of fast. When you have the same base, you want to subtract or cancel them out. So if this is to the power of 1, that'll cancel out or subtract, and then you're left with 2. Here, you had x squared divided by x to the power of 1. So that cancels out and you're left with 1. Okay, so I checked. All numbers cannot be divided further by the same thing. 1, 5x, and 25x squared cannot be divided further. So I'm probably okay. And now down here, okay, so again, we're looking for the smallest number. So 12 is the smallest integer here. However, 12 and 15 do not, that's not going to be a nice visible, divisible number, okay? So then you have to think, again, this is why multiplication tables might help you here, what goes into 12, okay? So start with 2. 2 goes into 12. You get 2 times 6 is 12. However, right away you can nix 2 because 15 and 21 are odd numbers and not even. Okay? Then what's the next number? 3. Does 3 go into 12? Yes. You get 4. Does 3 go into 15? Yes. You get 5. Does 21 go in, or does 3 go into 21? Yes. You get 7. Okay, so always start with the lowest one. So 3 is going to be our number. And as you go, just kind of check. No big deal. Okay, so 12 divided by 3 is 4. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 21 divided by 3 is 7. Now, we do have some letters. So we want your variables, we want to take care of those. And again, whenever you do the x's and the y's, you want to look for the lowest exponent. So here we have x squared, here we have x, and here we have x cubed. So the lowest exponent is is x. Okay, so then x squared divided by x will give you 1x. X divided by x just cancels out. You get 1. And then x cubed divided by x gives you x to the power of 2. Okay, so you can go through the process here. Now we have y cubed, and we have y cubed. So we can do y. That's the lowest one. That cancels. That gives you y squared. Same with this one, y squared, or y to the power of 2, if you prefer that. Okay, so I've checked 4x, 5, and 7x squared, y squared. They do not have anything common divisible between them, so the greatest common factor is good. Okay. So part of it is choosing the greatest common factor, but also we need to write something in what's called factored form. So that's really going to be important. Again, as we get more complicated. So we have to find the greatest common factor, but we also have to be able to write it in factored form. So when you do simple binomials like this, when there's only 2 terms, then factored form is pretty straightforward. But like I said, we are going to get a little bit more complicated, of course. Okay, so here all the question says is factor, and that's all it's going to say. So no matter, even when we get more complicated, step 1 is going to be find the GCF. No matter what, even when we do complete the square and all these crazy things, you always have to find the greatest common factor. And when you're done, you can check. And you can actually double check because when we have factored form, you can, you can redistribute. Sorry, it seems to have frozen here. You can redistribute and you should get the same answer back. So then you know that you've probably done, then you can check that you've gotten your answer right. Now, if you struggled with the distributive property last semester or last year, then maybe that's not really something that is going to be helpful for you, but really there's not that many questions for homework. The more questions that you do, the greater the chance of success you'll have. Okay, this isn't graphing yet or anything like that. You don't have to draw the triangles. You don't have to have a crazy calculator. You can Google a multiplication table, and you don't even need a calculator. There's lots of ways to be successful here. Sorry, I don't know why all of a sudden this isn't working. There we go. Oops. So we're going to redistribute, double check, redistribute back to the question. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and maybe when you're doing the homework, you just want to check in the back of the book. But since you have time at home when you're doing the assignment, then you can easily check this when you're doing the work. Okay, so we have 4n minus 10. So this time we don't have an x. That's no big deal. Our variable is an n. But since there's no variable in the 10, we can't use that as our greatest common factor. So 10, you can check in your calculator. Those are both even numbers, but 10 does not divide it by 4 evenly. So we're going to have to stick with 2. Okay, so our greatest common factor is going to be 2. Now, when you factor an expression and you write it in factored form, then you can't just put what the greatest common factor is. Okay, so that is going to go, the greatest common factor goes on the outside of the brackets. Remember, we want to be able eventually to redistribute. So this is going to look like an expression from last year where you would have used the distributive property. And then what you're thinking in your head is divide each of the terms by the greatest common factor. So 4n squared, or 4n divided by 2 is 2n. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Okay? And then the double check at the end, you should be able to get it back. So this times this, and this times this. So 2 times 4n, 2 times 2n is 4n. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. Okay, that gave me the question, so I was right. Okay, so down here, now, when you do factored form, you shouldn't really have negatives in your first term in your brackets. So let's 2 and 4. 4 is divisible by 2, but we're going to use a greatest common factor of actually negative 2, okay? So we're going to divide by negative 2. And like I said, maybe in the homework today you can, but eventually you won't be able to. So you might as well just not do it now, okay? So you divide negative 2y by negative 2 gives you just y, and then negative 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. And again, you want to recheck 2 times y, 2 times 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So you get negative 2y. Negative 2 times y is negative 2y. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4, which is what the question says. Okay, so that's the whole process here. So sometimes the questions are really simple, like this one. These two numbers are the same, so the greatest common factor is going to be 3. So then 3x divided by 3 is 1x. So again, normally we don't write the 1. If you did, I would not take marks off. And then negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. Go back and check. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. And that is the question. So we're good to go. Okay, so now these ones have variables as their greatest common factors. No problem. So here, the lowest is x. So that's going to be our greatest common factor. So then divide by x, you get 1. Divide by x here, you get 3. And then the x's cancel, 3x. You do the same thing. You can check if you're right. 1 times x is x. 3x times x is 3x squared. So that's the question. And then down here now, the greatest common factor is the lowest variable again, is the y. So divided by y, they cancel out. So you're left with 4. Divide by y, that cancels, and you're left with 1. Recheck. Or double check, I guess I called it. Y times 4 is 4y. Y times negative y is negative y squared. And that was the question. Okay, down here. So now our GCF, again, is just the variable is x. So they cancel, you're left with negative 4. 3x squared divided by x, that one cancels, and you're left with 3x. And then you can check. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. 3x times x is 3x squared, and that is the question. Okay. All right, so let's do ones that are a little bit more complicated. Now, we're going to do letters and numbers as the greatest common factor. But again, you're always looking for what's going to make it the lowest, right? So we have 3 and 6. So definitely 6 divided by 3 is 3. And we also have an x. So you can use the lowest number there. So divide by 3x, divide by 3x. We're going to factor it and write it in factored form. So our greatest common factor, you write outside. And then the 3's cancel, so you're left with 1. X cancels, so all we're left with is x. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and the x's cancel. So it's the same steps, just a little bit more thought involved when you're doing the question. Okay, so but again, you can check your answer. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 2 is 6x. Okay. Now this one down here, 24 does not, or 16 does not go into 24 evenly. So then again, start at the beginning. What's 2? What are they divided by 2? So 2 times 8 is 16. So then when you do 24 divided by 8, you get 3. So that's a good choice. And there is no m in the 16 term, so we can't use any letters. So we're just dividing by 8. and then recheck again. And recheck up here, sorry. Oops. 8 times 3m squared is 24m squared. And 8 times -2 is -16, which is the question, so we're good. Okay, so you're just always looking for the number and the letter that divides evenly. So down here, for example, we have 12y squared is the lowest term. So this 12 is the lowest number, and this y squared happens to be the lowest y term. So if you're not sure, then again, get out your simple calculator and do 24 divided by 12, which gives us 2, and 48 divided by 12, which gives us 4. So 12 is a great choice because in the first number, when we divide by 12, we're going to get 1. Okay, so 12, and then because the y squared in the second term is the lowest exponent on the variable, that's what we have to use because we don't want to get decimals. Okay. All right. So now 12 divided by 12 is 1, but we're going to write it in factored form, aren't we? So 12y squared. 12 divided by 12 is 1. Y to the 4 divided by y squared. You're left with y to the 2. Negative 24 divided by 12 is -2. And then the y squareds cancel. 48 divided by 12 is 4. And then y cubed divided by y squared. You're left with y to the power of 1. And then when you're doing a test, you can check. So 12y squared times y squared is 12y to the power of 4. 12y squared times -2 is -24y squared. 12 times 4, again, if you're not sure, just do it in a calculator, is 48. Y squared times y is y cubed, which is the question. Okay, so check out these homework questions and do as many as you can because I'm sorry.